Good evening and welcome to the April 9th, 2019 City Council Finance Committee meeting. If there is anyone in the audience who wishes to address the committee, you may do so at this time. You may speak on any item appearing on the agenda for not more than 3 minutes. Please stand and state your name and address and the item on the agenda in which you wish to speak. I would like to announce also that FATV is recording and broadcasting this meeting. So my first question to the audience is, anyone in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating their name and address. Seeing none, is there anyone here who wishes to speak for public forum?
Sam Squalia, City Councilor here, Fitchburg. 06819, in the lease documents, the rate, the base rent, is half the price of what it actually should be. So just like to address that when it comes up. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda. 119, in order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security Grant in the approximate amount of $7,521.28 for the purpose of said grant, which is to enhance effective pedestrian, bicycle, and moped type enforcement. Letter from Chief Martineau to the Mayor dated March 21st, 2019, reads as follows. Dear Mayor, the Fitchburg Police Department has received an allocation of funds totaling $7,521.28 from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, Office of Grants and Research, Highway Safety Division. These awarded funds are intended to develop or enhance an effective pedestrian, bicycle, and/or moped type enforcement effort to reduce the incidence of fatalities and injuries in these areas. The contract extends from March 1st, 2019 through September 30th, 2019. I request your approval to start spending down these funds. Chief, anything you'd like to add?
Just one thing I would like to add to that. This grant is a little bit higher than we've received in past years. Typically, this grant's anywhere from the $5,000 to $6,000 range. This year, it's in the $7,000 range. One thing we're adding to this is, as most of the viewers are aware of, the police department hands out several hundred bicycle helmets each year. And this year, we were able to incorporate equipment into this grant somewhat. And this will purchase approximately 100 to 150 helmets that will add to our stock that we're able to give out at the safety day during our Civic Day events. So a good portion of this is going back to equipment. Targeted hours, we're looking at about 150 hours of targeted enforcement throughout the city, primarily on pedestrian safety, primarily in our downtown area. I would be open to any questions if councilors felt so.
Councilor Boschman.
On this moped, well, let's talk about people walking.
Sure.
Downtown area.
Yep.
The council president across the aisle and I and a couple other councils filed a petition a few years ago on jaywalking. Are we enforcing jaywalking in the downtown area?
Currently,
Not throughout the city, downtown area?
currently, no.
No. Is there any reason why we're not doing that?
Manpower, distribution of manpower to enforce such activity as jaywalking. I'd be sitting here not being truthful if I was telling you I was having police officers enforce jaywalking downtown. Specifically with this grant, we can address pedestrian safety, which does fall within that preview, Councilor, and we did that last year during this time period, where I'm able to allocate additional resources to that. But currently, right now, I'm not enforcing. I haven't had officers enforcing jaywalking issues. We do that type of enforcement through this grant.
Okay, now the second question. As you see more and more bicycles becoming motorized, and you see mopeds quite a bit, what is, maybe you can answer me, maybe you can't, what is the age limit on a motorized bicycle? Bicycle now, not a dirt bike. I'm talking about a regular street bike. They put a motor on it, whether it be gas or electric. What age should you be to be able to ride it?
At least old enough for a permit age.
Permit age 16?
Yes.
Okay. And the same thing with a moped?
Right.
Now, if you come across people with these things, these bicycles that are moped or set out to be electric or motor with gas, and they're under 16, what happens then? You don't stop them, you just let them go on their way?
That's a whole different conversation. We're talking about justifications for stops during, an encounter with a police officer. I'll be honest with you, this grant, we're focusing primarily on pedestrian safety downtown. And another big issue is about people just driving bicycles on the sidewalks downtown. Those are the two big issues that I'm going to ask my officers to address. Pedestrian safety is a primary concern. Areas that you've been concerned with in the past, down by Dunkin' Donuts, up by Expressos, excuse me, I hate to bother you.
Sorry about that. It's the president.
He's over.
Those are my primary areas of concern, Counselor. Pedestrian safety downtown, we're talking about revitalization, all the investments we have going on downtown. So the majority of this money will be focused on our downtown area, speaking about pedestrian safety. And the other outlining area is what we can give back to the community through bicycle and safety, and, how we can promote safety with our kids in the community.
Okay, because the only reason why I asked you that, there was a pretty bad accident in my neighborhood with a bicycle and a car, and the car wasn't speeding.
It was.
And then right after that accident, there were two young adults on bicycles with the motor type thing, and they were, for the area, they were moving kind of fast, and they didn't have the helmets on or anything like that, and they were young teenagers. I don't like to dictate. I think government's big enough, but I was just wondering, when I read this, I said that I was going to ask you that question. I really should have called you, but I didn't call you till I get tied up. But that was the only thing I wanted to know, because it really bothers me, because sometimes those bicycles with the motor on it, they go pretty fast, and they come out of nowhere. And if you're driving a car, it's pretty hard to see. And that's why I say that.
We've been receiving this grant for several years from the Executive Office of Public Safety. Like I said earlier, this year it's a little bit higher, which we're excited, because it gives us the opportunity to buy some bicycle helmets. But the majority of my enforcement will be towards pedestrian safety, specifically in our downtown district.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. President.
Motion to approve 100.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 10019. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Council.
Next, we move on to 10119, in order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the sum of $18,883, same to be charged from election and registration, personal services, election workers, and credited to election registration expenses, voting equipment. Letter from Anna Farrell, City Clerk, dated March 27th to the Mayor, states as follows. There is a surplus in the personal services account due to the fact that I budgeted to staff expected early voting before the 2018 state primary that was later not ordered by the Secretary of State, as well as a supplement to the account from state reimbursement extended polling hours funding. The city is in need of new voting booths. We purchased the existing booths 15 years ago. They have served us well over the years, but they are in need of replacement. Some are completely unusable, and many of the legs are broken in the ones we do use, posing a setup challenge for each election and a potential hazard for voters. I've been researching new booths since last year and, after sampling and viewing several others, have found a product that is sturdy, easy to set up, compact to store, and competitively priced. Price quote for the product is attached. In total, $16,446 for 33 triple booths and 12 ADA station booths. This will provide adequate product for 12 precincts. We also need to pay $850 annual software licensing fee for our tabulators, copy of invoice attached. Normally, I pay this out of the election office supplies account, but that is a current balance of only $160.79. I spent more than anticipated out of the account due to the need for a $1,000 portable handicap ramp installation at Sima Park for the 2018 November election, the recount after the state primary, and the necessary purchase of new, reusable, and modern covers for our voting lists after the last ones literally fell apart. Ms. Farrell, anything you'd like to add?
I make a
I think that
motion that we
says it all.
accept.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 10119. This is just a straight transfer of funds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors.
Moving to 10219, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $7,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to the Department of Public Works, Highway Personal Services, Summer Help, $6,000 in Department of Public Works highway expenses, sidewalk maintenance, $1,000 for the purpose of performing outside maintenance duties in the downtown area and along main roads. Letter from Commissioner Laxo to the mayor on March 27th states as follows. I request the approval of the mayor and the city council for $7,000 from available funds to cover the cost of seasonal help plus related expenses for the remainder of FY19 to perform outside maintenance duties in the downtown area and along main roads. The work would consist of maintaining landscapes such as traffic islands, planting areas, and grassy areas by weeding, watering, picking up trash, pruning, sweeping, mowing, weed whacking, planting flowers, spreading mulch, etc. This work would improve the appearance of prominent areas in the city and free up DPW parks crews so they can concentrate on parks. The cost of one full-time seasonal laborer until June 30th is $6,000, and the cost of related expenses is $1,000. There will be a request in the FY20 budget for this temporary position to cover the remainder of the season in calendar year 2019 as well as spring of 2020. And we have here Chief of Staff to the Mayor, Adrian Terigni. Is there anything you'd like to add, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two minor things. The first, Commissioner Laxo sends his regrets that he's unable to attend this evening. And also, I just wanted to point out that this measure is a focus of Mayor DiNatale's and has been for quite some time. And he wanted to take this opportunity this coming spring to do so to help dress up our appearance within the downtown corridor.
Council Bushman.
I just want to point out that along the main road, I think they left out some of the important areas, Lower Claylon. I mean, you don't have that in there. But to get back to, may I ask the commissioner, the standing for commissioner, I notice when I drive by different communities, their cities allow them to put advertisement in, and these people who take the advertisement and put it in the roundabouts and along roadways maintain the property for free advertisement. Why aren't we doing that instead of hiring somebody where they come in, they say shacks, we use shacks because they're going out of business now, and they want to take over the road, the roundabout in Lower Claylon. They put a sign in there, but they can make beautifications and everything, and they take care of it all the time.
Yeah, Councilor, I'd be happy to answer that. We do implement that in some portions of the city. You'll notice that typically in front of IC Federal Credit Union. There's another one off of Summer Street as well that's also well maintained. There's a few throughout the city. But it's a mixture of both. You can't heavily rely on free advertising for other companies to come in and take care of these islands. And furthermore, who's going to police that? This is a voluntary thing as well. So even if a private company does decide to volunteer to take care of an island, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to take care of that island. On top of that, there are also other communities that we're aware of that is doing a mixture of both of these types of coordination between the city helping facilitate cleaning up these traffic islands in other areas, as well as utilizing private companies to help maintain some of them too.
You know, Mr. President, what I have a hard time with, I won't take it out on you. I have a
Council
hard time.
Bushman, I'm not the president, I'm the
Well,
chairman.
Chair, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
What I have a hard time with, and I really do have a hard time, and I'm sticking up for Mayor DiNatale on this. We made some big changes on River Street, big changes. And what upsets me the most is that with these changes, even then, people don't want to maintain the front of their sidewalks and with these big changes. We spent $3.5 million or $2.5 million in that area.
Council, we didn't spend anything, the state did.
Well, I know the state, it was a grant, but we spent it. We had no problem spending it.
Not with city money.
We spent $3.5 million, and we can't even get people to take care of the flowers and pull out the weeds and put some mulch back down.
Point of order. I respect the subject matter under discussion, but it's not related to whether we approve this.
Well, it is
Or
true,
not.
because it says maintenance. So what does maintenance mean then?
Counselor, I will allow Council Bushman to continue on what he's saying. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yep.
So that's all I want to know.
So this is what this is trying to address. I understand that private property owners within those areas aren't perhaps maintaining the public right-of-way in front of that abuts their building or runs parallel to. It's not their obligation. We would absolutely love to have them participate in that matter so that we don't have to subsidize these types of events with free cash or with city money. But we regardless, that still needs to be taken care of. It's still public property, so it's still our responsibility, and we'd like to clean up that presence for us.
All right, that's it. Thank you, sir.
Motion to approve 10219.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 10219. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you, councilors.
Last item on the agenda. 06819, in order that the Airport Commission be authorized to lease said parcel for a period of more than 20 years to the City of Fitchburg as outlined in the enclosed lease agreement. And we have a communication provided to us from the City Solicitor's Office, from Assistant City Solicitor Christine Tree, dated March 25th to Clerk Farrell. Dear Ms. Farrell, attached, please find a correction to the order submitted to the City Council on Order 6919 involving the lease of an 18.23-acre parcel from the airport to the city. The rent stated in paragraph 1.2 of the lease should be $1,200 per month or $14,400 per year. I have attached a corrected page 3 of that proposed lease showing the amendment. Thank you, and let me know if you need anything else. Mr. Solicitor, anything you'd like to add?
Counselor, I brought in a clean copy of the lease for you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you.
I've given you a highlighted map so that it was very clear as to the delineation of the property that we're talking about. Actually, I'm very happy to bring this lease to your attention tonight. In fact, this has been the focus of the mayor's office to fix what has been decades-long problem with misuse of the land at the airport and a contest between the city of Fitchburg and the FAA. We finally have resolved that, and this lease, I'd like to read a portion of the FAA's letter. With Director Latourell, the Director of Airport Division of the FAA, writes, "We would like to also commend the city for the comprehensive revisions to the AKS recycling lease. These revisions ensure that this lease protects both the airport and the city. It also meets the grant assurances, financially self-sufficiency requirement, as the lease will continue to support the airport's current and future financial needs. We are elated that you will be using this lease, and this will be the base lease for all airport operations moving forward, for all your future leases. It is comprehensive and similar to many well-written leases that other airports within the New England region are using." So we're very happy with this lease. It's a culmination of hours of work. It's been vetted by 2 different tenants' attorneys, as well as been in the law office for a period of time. Just to take a step back, this is a very simple situation. The FAA and the city have had an long-going dispute regarding the use of airport land, and what the mayor's office was able to arrange is that the FAA is permitting the city to rent this space from our airport, and then in turn, we may turn around and rent it to whoever we choose to rent it for. In this particular case, subsequent to this, you'll be seeing a new lease which is currently under negotiation with the presently existing business there, AKS. And AKS is paying into the city the new stated rent that's in this lease. In addition to that, they'll be paying tipping fees, which averaged last year to be about an additional $300 per month, and they'll pay an additional host fee, which last year was $282,000 for the year, according to the records I had from the auditor's office. Us being able to get through that negotiation with the FAA, allowing us to maintain those host fees and the tipping fees, was a big win for the city, and I was really happy to be able to present that to you tonight.
So, Mr. Solicitor, I have some questions here about the finances. So, you just mentioned 3 numbers. You said $3,600 was for, $300 a month was for the tipping fees?
The average tipping fee last year was $350.
So $350 times 12 is, well, $300 times 12 is $3,600, but, so that's $4,200?
Yes, sir.
You said the host fee was $282,000, and that's an annual payment? Or is that a one-time payment?
That was the total from last year.
So is that an annual payment?
Yes, it's based on tonnage, so as the tonnage changes, that host fee changes.
And then the lease itself is $14,400.
Currently, it's 6,000 a year, or just about 600, it's 7,200 a year, 600 a month.
Okay.
But that's going to be, what happened in that situation, sir, is that AKS hasn't encroached into other areas, so we are going to be getting a larger lease payment.
So prior to this agreement, or this agreement we're working on, we were only getting 7,200 from AKS? Or were we getting nothing?
No, this agreement was reached, no, these tipping fees and these host fees are a necessary component for Board of Health's budget, and I think that you've actually spoken to Mr. Curry about that in the
Yes.
past. I've watched you discuss this with him.
I'm trying to understand for the public, what is the gain financially
The
to the
gain
airport?
financially is the save,
Okay.
if you will. What the mayor's office was able to do in this case is, after a decade-long dispute with the FAA, predating, misuse for land since the 60s. Actually, there was land that we were looking at in the 70s. What the mayor's office was able to do is preserve that flow of income coming into the Board of Health.
Okay, so we were collecting that income,
Yes.
but there was a dispute with the FAA that could have potentially caused us to have to cease collecting that income.
If I can rephrase it again
Yep.
for folks at home, the land was specifically required to be used for airport purposes.
Yes.
And that therefore, arguably, all the money that land was making needed to be derived and put into the airport.
Right.
But in this particular case, the FAA permitted us to negotiate a two-step process. One, the airport leasing to the city.
Yep.
And the second step, the city then turning and leasing to AKS.
Okay. And if this did not happen, what would have been the ramifications?
The ramifications is the challenge to budget the operations of the health department would have been confounded by approximately $300,000.
And that could have been a simple matter of the FAA just saying, you know what, we're done with this dispute, we're going to say you can't do it.
Yes, and I will say, the mayor's office and the FAA, we heard from the director.
Yep.
Another gentleman up there, George Pantelli, were able to identify all these important issues for the city and come to terms on a corrective action plan for the entire use of the airport
Well,
land.
I appreciate the proactive nature of the city in getting this done. Very important. Something like this you'll probably never hear about, but it was a great move on our part, and the FAA is praising us for our diligence on the matter. So it's definitely something to be proud of, and it saves the city in the long run from the unfortunate event of losing revenue because we did not do our due diligence. So this is good news. So I thank you for your efforts and for everybody else involved. Councilor Zarella.
So, yeah, I think this is a no-brainer. I think the city's done an excellent job on this. And just because I always like to try to lay out our alternatives, I want to be clear. Our alternative here, if this falls through, isn't the federal government lets go of any airport land. It isn't we avoid payments to the airport. It's we lose out on this deal that is benefiting the city to the tune of over $250,000 right now with no compensatory benefit to us. If we have to pay an additional $7,000 a year to maintain $300,000 a year in city revenues, that's, I literally cannot fathom turning that down.
Can I just clarify,
Yes.
too? Most importantly, the consequence of not approving the entire corrective action plan was to remove the city from a funding list in the United States Congress, where the grants that we've been receiving to get our airport in the condition that it can be self-sustaining are coming from. And that was a real concern that the mayor wanted to make sure that we did not even approach that risk. And we were able to, we completed that goal in December last year.
Councilor Bushman?
I was just going to ask you that question because I do have it highlighted, and that was one of my main things, is I'm not a fan of the airport, and I was going to ask you that if
You're going to become a fan of the airport.
So if we float this down. I read that where the United States government may no longer fund different projects, and then we won't be under the stamp of the federal government, because they're no longer giving the city of Fitchburg any money. Am I right or wrong?
That would be incorrect, and I can understand the logic, and it's attractive, but ultimately it's wrong. We have signed grant assurances for decades, prior to this current administration and many administrations prior to them, promising to use the airport specifically for airport purposes. In fact, the land that the AKS is currently situated on is specifically encumbered by a restriction for airport purposes only. So the extent that the fair market value lease is being paid into the airport is a critical part to satisfy that.
I understand that, but as I was reading this, your contract, which I think favors the airport versus the city, as we're taking full responsibility for everything that happens down there. And what I had a hard time with, I thought the way I read it in this contract, that this parcel over here was bought by the city from the airport. And that as they approach this area, this point 18, the A area, is the airport. And that's, if I recall right, it comes out to 18.3 acres, 18 and a quarter acres.
Can I approach the counselor, so he can direct me as to what he's looking at?
I thought this section over here, the airport sold this land to the city.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna lease the remainder, and I believe that's 18.3 acres, right?
About that, sir. I
Right,
don't have the
18 and, let's say 18 and a quarter, it's .23. So 18 and a quarter acres of land for $7,200 a year.
14,400.
Huh?
14,400, it's been updated.
Saying here, 7,200.
Yes, that's an old copy, they have to amend it. I just
This is
read
the one they
amendment.
gave me.
So, Counselor, I'd like to, that's a very good point, and that was if I can I answer that point?
Yep.
What we're talking about is what is the payment that the city is going to make into the airport,
Right.
which is really going to be somewhat of a paper adjustment if you understand the cash flow. The city is paying all kinds of money into the airport. So that will be an obligation now that the city has to the airport. That dollar amount is another win in the negotiation that we had with the FAA. That dollar amount could be higher, but it's not, and there's a couple of reasons why. To your point, not only was these pieces of property sold, we had over 27 different pieces of property that we had to square away with the FAA as to whether they were properly or improperly sold, and if improperly sold or conveyed, what the cost of that for an accounting between us and the airport and the FAA would be. These particular ones that you're talking about on Cobbler Drive and Blueberry Drive are critical to the reason why it's $1,400. If you look at that land, for the most part, other than through those properties that have been sold, quite frankly, to AKS for that, the property that we're leasing is somewhat landlocked. It's also challenged as it borders conservation land. It also has other restrictions on it, which, as I said, airport use only, so on and so forth, which really impacts the fair market value of that piece of real estate. So the highest and best use, I think, is what we're currently doing, and that's why we needed to preserve it. We need to keep the host fees coming in, and we need to maintain those tipping fees.
Okay. I think I understand what you're trying to say.
But what I'm saying is, because the sale of the properties that you identified, not a lot of takers for that land, because you'd have to cut through these people's property, and we'd either have to take more roadway or do something else there. And so this is probably the best use you're going to get for this.
Okay. Now, as I was reading on the contract that I got in the package on March 14th, I didn't get the revised one till today, but on the one I got, it says in there that it's going to be, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, a 49-year lease? And it's going to go 49-year lease where at 10 years, the rate can go from 7,200 or whatever, and then it can go, and it's going to be from CPU, the
It's gonna be-
consumer index?
It's going to be it's a 20-year with options for extension. There's a adjustments clause, which is tied to the consumer price index for the Boston, Brockton, Nashua area, and the CPU times 1. It's a very good corrective. And then, in addition to that, what will happen is every 10 years, we could go through an appraisal process.
Right. I read
Correct.
that.
So what I'd like to say is, so this will be the lease that we use for the lease of land for any land that's at the airport at this point in time. And that's why I was happy to read the comments from the FAA, because quite frankly, Counselor, we got a lot of pushback from folks leasing land up at the airport, even for airport purposes, when we present them with this lease. We get all kinds, it's too long, it protects the airport too much, but this will also be the lease that this city uses when we turn around and reconfirm our lease with AKS. So the protections that the airport's getting will be similar to the protections that the city's getting from AKS as well. Okay?
Okay. No. So on the lease that you're gonna draw up with AKS, because this is the reason why we got this, and basically it's gonna be the AKS lease, and we're just taking this as a guideline. I've been reading in here on some of the articles, and I have a hard time with the landlord-tenant, and us being the tenant, and the landlord sits back and their hands are washed and they got no responsibility whatsoever. So we are responsible, according to what I read in here, responsible for everything that happens down there. So my first question is, we're all human beings, and we all try to take shortcuts, and that's a recyclable center. People dump off their trash. I know people that take oil and dump it in the barrel,
Yeah.
and it starts leaking. Now we have a contamination problem.
Yes, sir.
And so who's responsible for the contamination problem?
It is an excellent question, Counselor. The reason why the city's responsible for is the reason why we're accepting the $282,000 a year in those host fees. In order to collect a fee, it has to be necessarily comparable to some impact. And that's a discussion you're going to be hearing a little bit more in the marijuana context. The impact with this, trash up and down Airport Road, right?
Oh, yes,
my
we're gonna
friend,
bring that up, too.
You've talked to me about that a lot, and I've heard you, and when we deal with AKS, we discuss that with them, and I think you'll be happy. We're working on something that's going to be memorialize some obligation in that regard. But this future cleanup is a definite issue that we're going to have to be worried about. Now, it's been going on, Counselor, since, I think, before 2010. This has been there a long time at this point. So, probably already dirty, okay? The prior agreements for the host fees, in essence, are intended to compensate us for that future potential cleanup as to what you're going to deal with. Absent that, it's very difficult to justify what those impacts would be. So let's just say that Boschman LLC wanted to come in and start making widgets in the city of Fitchburg. And it turns out that I had a lot of authority over land use or perhaps permission to even operate that type of business. And I said to Boschman LLC, you know what, you can come in here and I will give you a permit and I will give you, but you got to pay me. You got to pay me $280,000 a year. That might be seen as unlawful, and unlawful for the city to extract that kind of money unless it's justifiable. So in this case, that's the justification for the receipt of those funds.
Okay. Now, since you brought up the AKS, and since he brought up the trash, I'm hoping on this deal that you signed with the AKS, and I know it's not my ward, but I drive that road every day. You start off from Benson Street, and you go down to the city line, and I'm taking it easy on them, because Benson Street, I've seen trucks coming down Benson. And I'm also asking, not only do they pick it up 3 feet from the road, that they literally go inside and pick up their trash that's blown inside as it comes off the truck, all by picking up in the wind.
I think there's a couple of things. First and foremost, you don't have to ask me. I want to assure you that your mayor is on me on keeping the airport road clean. Okay?
Oh, you're
and
a
it's an
town.
important part for his perspective negotiation. And we are working on something. We're putting something in there.
We can discuss this when we have the agreement with AKS.
What's that?
We can discuss this when we have the agreement before us with AKS.
Yeah, because I just don't, Mr. Chair, I don't want to see the city workers down there picking up, and I really don't want to see the sheriff's department.
And the chief has also done a lot of work informing them about unsecured loads and taking a proactive policing approach too. So between those two tools, we're working on that.
Okay, but you know
I
what?
think there's been an improvement down there.
Right, there has been, and I'm not
Okay.
disputing that, a big improvement. So you ought to be happy, because I keep on telling you, there's been a big improvement, and I let you know. And I do tell you thank you. But I don't, personally, honestly, I don't want to see the chief spend his time down there telling Councilor Di Natale to put something on his thing. I think it's up to the responsibility of AKS to do it, not the chief. AKS, and tell them to turn around and go back, because they have to pick up the rubbish, and that was the
Point of
whole
order,
purpose
Mr.
of this.
Chair. I think you just clarified there'll be ample opportunity when they.
Yes, I hear him, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. Yes, Counselor Boschman, please stick to the...
What, do you
to
get a
the
headache?
agreement. I don't have a headache, sir. You're talking about something that's not relevant to the conversation.
It is, it's in the
No, it's
contract.
not relevant to the conversation.
Oh, the conversation. All right, so anyway, the only thing I don't like about it, I really think a lot of it's one-sided. It's all what I read on this thing, the one I received, and the March 14 package. And I did read it.
So the comment that this doesn't benefit the city as much as the airport, that means that we're okay with losing $300,000 a year in revenue.
Yes, sir.
So, take that for what it's worth. That's, I don't know, 5 police officers, 5 firefighters, a lot more DPW workers. Certainly wouldn't be able to afford anything with the Longs Joe roof that we did, with the asbestos abatement. I can go down the list.
Steve
this
Curry would probably quit.
This
'cause he
this
can't-
protects the city from the federal government stepping in once and for all and saying, we're not playing games anymore. You are not allowed to funnel that money to city coffers. It stays with the airport. So you could make an argument, the airport's getting the short end of the stick because it's on their land, but we're getting the money. And we need that $300,000. That's part of our free cash that comes in because our tipping fees through the Board of Health budget brings a profit into the city above and beyond what our trash service fee is in our operating side of the budget. So we run a major risk of losing this $300,000 a year. That's the bottom line that I tried to zero in on, is by doing this, it protects us from that money being removed. And that, to me, in and of itself, means this is a big deal for the city. $300,000 of lost revenue is a big deal when your budget is 93% non-discretionary. So this completely helps the city out more so than the airport, in my opinion. It helps both out, but I would say the pendulum's more on the city side because we get a big benefit out of the use of airport land, and as the FAA has stated in the letter to Solicitor Pusateri, they praised our staff for their diligence in this, because apparently for years, over many administrations, this was either ignored or this wasn't even fully delved into at our own risk. And this would be one of those subjects where I'm convinced that however many years down the road, if the FAA were to come at us, the residents would be up in arms because, like the sewer separation project, they'll be going, you guys had a chance to solve this problem and you chose not to, and now we lose out. So, and certain counselors, or all counselors, would probably be up in arms too. What were we thinking? So this is a proactive measure that may not look like it sets off a lot of fireworks with people in terms of enthusiasm, but it protects us from losing critical revenue that we need to sustain current operations within the city. So that's my position on this. Councilor Zarella.
First, I'd like to make a motion to approve 6819. I'll hold my motion. But I would like to clarify, it sounds like this is the best lease for the city that the FAA is going to allow the airport to enter into with us. Is that correct, Mr. Solicitor?
Yes, well, this lease was, I would like to say it this way, this lease was a necessary component to a corrective action plan that we successfully negotiated, included over 27 different pieces of property. So this was one of 27.
Right, so
And this-
basically.
This was a part and parcel of a number of different compromises.
Right. So basically, we don't have, again, speaking in terms of what alternatives are actually in front of us, we don't have the option realistically to go back to the table and say we want a better deal on this. This is already better than we reasonably could have expected. So realistically, our options are take it and leave it. And voting to leave it is essentially voting not to give less to the airport, but in fact voting to hand over $300,000 a year to the airport. Because if we don't strike this deal, the FAA is going to say, per your grant assurances, all revenues from this lease must be funneled into the airport. Which I'm sure the airport would be thrilled with, but I don't think that my colleague would be thrilled with that. There is no scenario in which we vote on this and get more for the city and less for the airport than this current proposal. No realistic scenario.
President Kuchmer?
This is an obvious win to protect a recurring and vital and significant revenue stream for the city for the next 20 years. So I won't belabor that piece further. The discussion about potential contamination and cleanup down the road, because we are getting this host fee, I guess my question is less about the short term, but more about the long term of, as we near the expiration of this, how do we ensure that we don't just wake up in 2039 or 2040 and say, oh, we have a contamination site and we had never put aside money for this? How do we ensure, and maybe this is a question to the auditor of, as we approach those final 5 years, how do we start to prepare for what potential costs could be, and how do we start to reserve some of these funds, maybe earmark them towards our contingency funds, and hopefully that's just a renewal of the contract and we don't have to worry about this for 200 years. But the point remains of how do we ensure that we divert these funds to for the intended use when that time comes.
May I answer?
Sure.
I think there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can set up an escrow account where you take part of the rental income from it and put it aside into an escrow for the point at which it's closing, with an intent of having a certain sum at the end to do any cleanups or anything like that. I'm not sure that the city is in a position to do that, given its current cash flow. However, that's also perhaps what a stabilization fund can do, that if we continue with maintaining and building a stabilization fund, that could be used at some future point if there were an unforeseen event, such as a tenant walking away and leaving a mess.
Sure. I guess to that point, maybe it's, in future years, we look to take 5% of this and earmark it towards stabilization, that realizing over the course of, of 20 years, you've essentially earmarked enough aside to potentially mitigate any future harm. So I guess in 15 years, Auditor Brooks, I'll give you a call and remind you that we need to start.
You'll have to remind me, because I will have forgotten.
Understood. So again, I won't belabor this, but I hope that, we are forward-thinking enough to, as we approach the expiration of this contract, that we begin to concern ourselves with this issue.
I think to that point, Counselor, the city has for many years now put aside one of the first items out of free cash every year, $250,000 or $300,000 into stabilization.
Right.
And I certainly would hope, and I'll be the first one to criticize, that is the first item that continues to get funded before we touch anything else. If that practice continues, that's $5 million into stabilization in the next 20 years. Technically, you can make the argument that we are putting money aside for an emergency like this that I wouldn't say is necessarily unforeseen, but it's a one-time remediation expense. So it certainly wouldn't be budgeted for. It can be saved for, you could even use free cash for it instead of going through stabilization, because again, it's a non-recurring cost, a one-time effort. But if we were not saving money into our STABE every year, I'd have a similar concern. But the fact that we're putting hundreds of thousands of dollars away every single year, and we will continue to do so, I'm not as concerned about the impact in the future as some may be. If that does not continue, I will be. But we know about it now. We know there's the potential. But again, it's a one-time expense. So either the free cash avenue or stabilization would be preferable. And I would hope free cash would be first than stabilization, because stabilization to me is an account that you use for huge recession that causes tremendous losses in aid from state and federal governments that we have to pick up the slack on for 2 or 3 years. So, I mean, it's great point. I think by us saving money in STABE every single year and continuing to do so, we're kind of, in a way, putting money away for something like that already. Because the $300,000 we get is a big part of our free cash that we realize, because the tipping fees make so much money for us that you can make a strong argument that a lot of our free cash comes specifically from trash service. So I would make that distinction. I would make that correlation.
Just 15 seconds. We're aware that is an issue, and that is part of the ongoing discussions we're having with AKS. So we hope we'll have something for you on that as well, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council Boschman.
I just want to verify one thing that everybody's saying. I'm not saying I don't want the $300,000. All I'm saying, on the 18 acres, because the city owns, and he said it, that piece of land right over here, we own it. And so we get that $300,000 or whatever you want, tipping fee, because we own that. And the whole thing started about because AKS expanded over to their property and our property, and we wanted to get paid more money, and the airport was complaining. So $7,000, $200 or whatever you is, $600 a month for 18 acres is a steal. A steal.
The airport was complaining, sir, because they're getting not as much as we're getting, and it's their land. Back to your point earlier about if this weren't to go through, they could take the $300,000, and I'm sure you, being a big fan of the
I
airport,
thought
would
we
love
owned
that.
that land.
The airport owns the
The
land.
airport owns the land.
The amount of acreage that you're looking at was an unlawful encroachment by a business, and the mayor's office, I think, is successfully weighing maintaining a successful operation of a business on the one hand, and the collection of money on behalf of the city on the other hand. And where we're going to get rent, we're going to get tipping fees, and we're going to get those host fees. Talked about the preservation of the cash flow already. And some of that is now going to get paid into the airport, about $14,000 or so a year, and that's going to come as a pass-through from AKS. They're going to pay us that rent, but we're still going to get, going into the city, the tipping fees and the host fees, which is the overriding lion's share of all the money that's going. It's the same thing as you lease to me a piece of property, and I go out and I get a McDonald's to come and build a McDonald's on it. I might be making a ton of money on leasing it off to a McDonald's, and you're only going to get a portion of that from me. It's the same thing, and it's the landlocked nature of that property. If you look and you say, this is, if the folks watching at home are saying, we're leasing 18, whatever acres, well, all the land around it has been sold, and some of it's actually owned by AKS. So it's a very challenging piece of property to lease and to say we're going to get high-priced fair market value for. So respectfully, when I talk about the fair market value, I do have to consider that as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Motion to
you.
approve 6819.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 6819. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
I'm sorry, councilors. We did not vote, I think we needed to have an amendment to amend the lease agreement.
Motion to amend the dollar amounts as per the updated lease agreement?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to amend 6819 to include the correspondence from Solicitor Tree on the lease amount amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'll take a motion for,
Motion to adopt as amended.
Second?
motion made and seconded to adopt as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Where you going now?